Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's now time for our main event. Take a trip back in time to the golden era of the wrestling world with your host, Chris Tetrold Blade. Welcome to Once Upon A Turnbuckle.
Welcome to another very, very special episode of Once Upon a Turnbuckle, and I have truly been like a kid at Christmas or waiting for Christmas since I knew that this guy was coming on the show. So like me, if you've grown up with what I consider to be the best era of the WWF, the sort of the early to mid 90s, you may not know the name, you may not know the face, but you will know this guy's work. He created so many of our memories visually. Tom Fleming, welcome to the show. Thank you, mate.
Well, thanks for having me. It's funny you say that, if you don't know the name or the face, it seems as though I'm finding out just recently that nobody's known that I've done all this stuff, back in the 90s. And it's kind of coming to light, and I've gotten such a great reception from the fans and stuff, just after, 30 years or so. Kind of sharing all the drawings and paintings and designs and stuff that I did for the WWF. So pretty much, besides some very few comic book fans that have met me at conventions and things like that, nobody's going to recognize the face of the name until now. So it's kind of nice.
And that's the beauty of social media. So that's really how I discovered who you were, really. I think we were in a mutual vintage classic wrestling fan group, and you put up, I believe it was the drawings that you did for the Royal Rumble 94. I think you put that up, and you happened to mention on there that this is some of the work that you did, and I took a second take. I was like, wow, and then it kind of went on, and then I found more and more of your posts, and I was like, this guy, pretty much like I said at the beginning, he illustrated my childhood, because as a 7-year-old that I was when I discovered wrestling, it was the really visual characters and the outfits and the posters, everything that drew me in. And we'll get to talk about specifically. I don't want to go too far down, just to let you know what my favourites are and everything. But before we sort of reach that point, let's go back, sort of talk a little bit about your background up to when you started to work for the WWF. What was it that you were doing? How did you get into it?
Well, interesting question, because I graduated from Syracuse University. Pretty much just got a job just to pay my bills, which was flipping pizzas, making pizza, making about $5 an hour just to pay my bills. And pretty much, just kind of doing whatever freelance artwork I can do, which was really low rates at the time, because you always have to pay your dues. And I answered an ad in the New York Times, and it was a generic ad. Nobody mentioned who it was for. It just said an illustrator was needed, and I took about a half a dozen or so snapshots, threw them in an envelope, sent them off, and got a call to come in for an interview, and had no idea where I was going into, but they said, come in. It was in Stamford, Connecticut, and walked in, and the walls were covered in WWF posters and all kinds of, memorabilia and all that kind of stuff. And I thought it was the advertising agency that did the WWF's promotions, having no idea that it was actually the WWF. And I got suspicious when I was walking down the hall at the time, Vince McMahon was starting the WBF, the World Bodybuilding Federation. And as I'm walking down the hall, Tom Platz, a professional bodybuilder, came walking past me, and I immediately recognized him and realized that, okay, something's going on here, because now, sports celebrities are walking around the halls. And then they informed me when I came into the meeting that it was the actual WWF, and and they're looking for they didn't mention a designer, they just said an illustrator.
So this wasn't Titan Towers that you went to, so it didn't give the game away sort of when you went to the building.
Exactly. It was actually a building that they were renting in Stamford, Connecticut, down the street. So I was there in the transition from starting to work at this in this other office space, and then watching Titan Towers fit the construction being finished, and then doing the big move to everybody setting up their office space and going over there, which was really exciting.
Okay. So before you saw that ad, what sort of work were you doing, and what sort of things had you done artistically up to that point?
Yeah. Okay. So I was pretty young. I was around 25, 26 years old. And at the time, so I graduated from Syracuse with my Bachelor of Fine Arts. And I started the first job the first magazine I ever worked for was Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine, which was a little horror magazine, black and white. I thought that I was going to be doing the cover illustrations for them, and had no idea that how much you really have to pay your dues. And they wound up giving me a bunch of interior illustrations that were black and white, and they paid me about $100. And after taxes and shipping and all that kind of stuff, I pretty much made about $50 each illustration. But nonetheless, it was a job. I was doing illustration work, and at the time, I was selling waterbeds. Okay. So yeah, in the 90s, waterbeds were big. I was a waterbed salesman.
It's retro now.
And what's that?
Retro now.
Yeah, exactly. Totally retro. And it was kind of in a way, an ideal situation, because selling waterbeds, there was very few customers that would come in. It was never like the store was very busy. So I had a desk, and I would sit there and I would do my illustration for Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine while I was actually at work selling waterbeds. Oh, and then when a customer came in, I would spend my time with them and then get back to the illustration. And then, there was a couple of one of the weird jobs that I got right off the bat was a good friend of mine that I graduated with was a designer, and he was working for a big design firm in New York City. And they had an illustrator that failed to do the job that they needed to be done. And it was for the label of a Minwax stains, wood stains. So it had nothing to do with anything that I wanted to get into. But at the time, the pay was really good for a 23, 24-year-old, and they needed the illustration in one night. So I pretty much pulled it all night, or 24 hours, just worked through, trained it into New York City, dropped it off, and that was my first color professional illustration job. And for 20 years, it was on the shelves in all the hardware stores and Home Depot and all that kind of stuff. So that's it was just random stuff. I had no plans of being a designer or an illustrator for the WWF. My dream at the time was to be a fantasy paperback artist. So to do fantasy, Conan and wizards, dragons, all that kind of stuff. So that was the goal. And then when I answered the ad in the New York Times, the trajectory changed quite a bit. And the career took a turn, really unexpected turn.
You could say that you ended up doing a little bit of, working on fantastical characters. in a sense, just slightly different.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I was a huge, I mean, growing up since I was a little kid, I was huge comic book fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought that I really had the ability to be a professional comic book artist. My kind of specialty was doing more realistic type of things that lent itself to fantasy art. So I take a lot of photo reference and work realistically when I paint, and that really worked for fantasy. And comic books are a lot more stylized, and a lot of you really have to develop a very recognizable style in order to really succeed at comics. And so, yeah, the dream was to do the fantasy stuff. And then, but I had comic book like drawings in my portfolio. So I think when the WWF interviewed me, they saw the type of drawing and paintings that I was doing, through school. And I think that was a big reason why they hired me, because they wanted to bring that into the costume design, which I had no idea that that's why they were hiring me. But eventually, that was my primary job in a way.
Sure. So, obvious question, I suppose. Were you a wrestling fan going into this, or was it a world that you didn't really sort of paid much attention to before you were then immersed in it?
I was not a wrestling fan at all. A matter of fact, I didn't even know who the Ultimate Warrior was when I got the job there. I knew, of course, everyone knew Hulk Hogan. After Rocky III, when he was Thunderlips, the world knew who Hulk Hogan was. And while I was working there, they gave, I heard somewhere, I don't know how accurate it is, but they said that at one point Hulk Hogan's face was more recognizable worldwide than Mickey Mouse. So yeah, which is a pretty neat, that's a pretty neat fact if it's if it is true. But I didn't know anybody. I didn't follow. Of course, Andre the Giant, the big ones, the household names. So yeah, it was an interesting thing to learn the ropes, pun intended.
And so I guess to bring a fresh kind of perspective on it, maybe, because if you got someone from within, maybe, I don't know, a lot of these things that you did. I
think I think you're right. I think if I was closer to the whole company and the wrestlers and the talent and all that stuff, I think it might have inhibited me a bit, because there's those preconceived ideas that would get in the way, as opposed to just being fresh ideas. And a lot of the stuff, I would just throw ideas out there just for the heck of it, and be amazed that was the ones that they chose for the designs.
Yeah, which is probably the most refreshing ones they received. And again, to repeat the point, if it was somebody else who knew more, who was already in there, they may not have taken a punt like you did with some of your designs. So let's get into that then. What was the first project, sort of the first official project that you had when you started working there?
Okay, so the first project ever. So I went in for the interview. Evidently, the interview went very well, because they offered me a job at the interview. They didn't even say we'll get back to you, and the job was to do and it was a little bit. It was kind of strange because the first big job that they gave me was a fully painted piece for the background to the Legion of Doom poster, which was the one in the back alleyway, and. Yeah, it was kind of, I thought they were going to test me out with, a smaller kind of, maybe a little pen and ink job or something, a little, maybe a little drawing for the magazine or something like that. And they had, they said, we need this background for the Legion of Doom poster. We're going to Photoshop the wrestlers on top of your painting. So it is absolutely crucial that it looks super realistic and that these wrestlers look like they're in the environment.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit nervous. It was actually almost in my wheelhouse. So it was something that it wasn't something that was totally new to me to paint like that. But because of the the size of the job and the specifics of when somebody says we need it super realistic, there's different levels of realism, and you don't know exactly what they mean. Do they mean it has to look exactly like a photograph? Does it have, So I was a little nervous. Went and I worked out of my home studio. I was not working in-house at the time, and went home and just started painting my ass off. That's it. It was just I tried to get it done. As they gave me a deadline, and I take my deadlines really seriously, and nailed the deadline, brought it in, and they were super happy with it. And that's when they offered me a 2 or 3 week trial of working in-house, setting up a cubicle and working in-house. And they said, if that goes well, we'll go from there. And going from there meant I wound up being there for 3-4 years in-house, and then wound up working for them for over a decade.
Wow. So it turned out for the best. So going from doing a background to a poster to then costume design, for lack of a better term, how did that occur? Or was there any pre-warning that that's the direction they were taking you, or did they just kind of land it on you one day?
As far as I remember, it was one of those things where I did the poster. Right after that, I started working in-house, and I believe the next job was probably for the Undertaker's first T-shirt, which was the pen and ink drawing of the Undertaker. But soon after that, because the Legion of Doom poster came over so well, that they offered me to do the Sid Justice poster.
Okay, cool.
And it was the one with the columns, and it said Sid Justice across the top. And
I think I remember. This is going back some time,
Yeah,
trying to picture my bedroom again. So.
Exactly. I believe that was 91. So
okay.
yeah, 91. So my daily job was to do stuff like this, pen and ink work for merchandise, and they did these kind of simplistic drawings of the wrestlers, black and white, that could be used on licensed for all kinds of products, and most people recognize them on the ice cream bars.
I was just about to say that. Were they those ones? Yes, I do remember those.
Yeah. So I started doing those, and at first I was not even drawing the figures. My boss, Adriana, was drawing the figures, and she would, to speed things up and to help her out, she would pass the drawings on to me to ink, and then I would ink them, and then she would draw them, and it became and it worked really well. And then eventually she was like, wow, she got the confidence in me and was like, we can get 2 jobs done at the same time. So she started drawing the figures and started letting me draw the figures, and I would draw and ink my a whole illustration myself, and then she would do the same thing. So yeah, it was doing that for a while. And to be honest, it's such a long time. I don't know what a while is defined as. It could have been a few weeks, a couple of months, I don't know. But I do know that out of the blue, she came over and she said, you know what, we need a new wrestler is coming in, and we need costume designs, and we're going to have you, my buddy Jay, her, and I think 1 or 2 maybe other designers. We're going to do costume designs. We're going to all submit them to Vince, and we're going to see what he likes. And I don't remember what the first costume was, but I do know that it was either Tatanka or Crush, I believe.
Okay.
And I think it was Tatanka, because Tatanka wasn't 100% my design. We were kind of throwing ideas off each other and working as a team. And then I did the actual the drawings that were submitted. And I've described the process in a couple of other podcasts of all four of us would do our designs, and we'd probably do maybe 3 or 4 designs each, maybe sometimes more, sometimes less. And we would go up to Vince's, down up to the penthouse floor, go down the marble hallway to the big doors, open the door, and in there he had a big table set up. And we would lay all the costume designs across the table, and he would come over and he would kind of start from the beginning and, look down at them and, kind of go from one end of the table to the other. And you hope that he stops at your design and takes a closer look. And eventually he stops and he just says, I like that one right there. And if it's yours, that's a good day of work. You're like, all right, I got this one today. It became a common for Vince to choose my designs, my boss's designs, or my buddy Jay's designs. So they started kind of weeding out the other designers and letting them do their other design work on logos and advertisements and things like that. And then the 3 of us started doing mostly the design work. And then my buddy Jay left the company, and me and Adriana became the costume designers, pretty much.
Cool. So, as I said, I was 7 years old when I discovered wrestling. So over here in the UK, especially at the time, I didn't have, cable TV. I couldn't see it on a sort of weekly basis. I was very reliant on being given videotapes, but also my main source of information at the time was the WWF magazine.
Yep.
The superstars that really jumped out at me are the ones that literally leapt off the page. There were a few going back to 92. So way back when I started this podcast, I talked about the 2 or 3 years which really are my favorite because I really discovered a lot of it for myself for the first time. 92, 93 are still amongst my favorite years.
Cool.
And I think during the early part of 92, that summer, whatever, there was guys like Papa Shango. When Crush came along and I first saw his feature in the magazine, it was his attire that really wow, I really want to see him in the ring. He's one I really want to watch. And another one, and I'm not just reeling these off just because you're here. This is genuine.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So these were guys that I didn't get to see a lot of, and I was really hoping they would make it to the big pay-per-view events because that's really the only time I got to see them in action. And another one that I really didn't get to see much in the ring, but I absolutely loved the costume, was Max Moon.
All right.
Okay, so again, the reason I brought this up, they were my favorites, but also you worked on all of those.
Yep.
So, we're talking sort of real comic book kind of imagery going on. What sort of briefs were you given for these kind of guys? Were you given much to go on, or was it literally just see what conjures up in your mind?
Well, it varied. Some of the wrestlers, they gave us a snapshot of their face and said, we need a concept. So just go off and do different ideas, different themes. Sometimes they came to us and they literally just said, this is, this guy is coming in. He, like Max Moon, he's going to be like a spaceman kind of theme. We need you to just come up with different ideas. And what we would do is we would have to take those, and there was a lot of factors that we had to consider when designing. And that is, especially for Max Moon, it's like there was the walk-in that he could look a certain way, but there was also the performance where where whatever he was wearing, it had to be durable and it had to be comfortable. So there was, we thought of, okay, when he has his entrance with the, it's got to be dramatic. He could wear things that were a bit more cumbersome, but when he's in the ring, he would have to take those off, and then whatever attire he's wearing it's got to be pretty much standard wrestling gear, which was the trunks, which was a singlet, or a variation of, those things. Papa Shango, for instance, they came to me. They didn't show me a picture of Charles. I had no idea what he looked like, but they did say, we want a Haitian voodoo witch doctor. And they gave me the movie, what was the name of the movie? It was a big movie that came out, Serpent in the Rainbow.
Okay.
Just came out fairly recent, and they said that would be a good starting point. There was a witch doctor, a Haitian witch doctor, and they said, take a look at that. Of course, we don't want you to copy that. We want you to come up with your own look. And I've shared the Papa Shango designs all over, on social media and on other podcasts. So I'm not sure if you've seen the original designs. You probably have.
See it in one of the other ones, yeah, because I'm friends with Jonathan O'Dwyer from Pro Wrestling Defined, so yeah, I saw the show with him, so yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Okay, so cool, yeah. So really, I started working on, it was me, my buddy Jay, and my boss Adriana. She was working on mostly the cape designs, and I did designs kind of focusing on the singlet, which was the double-headed serpent and the black with the red. And I drew, the smoking skull that he was holding with the beads. And I believe my buddy Jay drew. I think he came up with that rain stick. Rain stick. Yeah, it was either him or Adriana. And when we put the design together, Adriana put her face paint on the design, and I thought that the whole design was really effective, but the face paint was not working for me. And I was very careful because I didn't want to insult anybody, and she was really good at what she did. So I really didn't know how to handle it, but I knew that there had to be a kind of more of an edge to his face paint, and it had to look more imposing. So I actually did some designs of close-ups of his face with the face paint that everyone knows as Papa Shango. And I gave that to her, and I said, hey, I just did these as, extras. And she was like, oh, great. And we submitted those to Vince, and, the rest is history. He loved the costume designs with the face paint.
He was one of those characters that there was a certain type of wrestler back when I was growing up that used to really scare me. Whether it was their imagery or whether it was how brutal they were in the ring, he was both. He was even today, I don't think they've really come close to a character that had that much impact.
Yeah, and it's funny. Okay, so while I do these podcasts and stuff, and like you just jarred a memory that I haven't remembered since back in the day, based on Papa Shango, is that we would get fan mail, and the fan mail was not always praising what we were doing. We got fan mail from kids that were saying that Papa Shango is scaring them to death. I remember reading a letter from a kid that said his brother was put in a mental institution because he went crazy after watching Papa Shango. So I have no idea what the story is behind that, but we were, based on what you just said, we were absolutely getting letters that you were not the only one.
That's good to know. That's good to know. Yeah. But I mean, it's such an imposing. I didn't realize until further down the line that he then Charles Wright came back and he was these other multiple characters. Because he was so individual with every single one. You couldn't associate him back with Papa Shango, and it was it's still one of my favorite. Not only the imagery, but the whole thing about that character was just epic.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. I mean, of my three top designs that I've done, I have to say was Razor, Razor Ramon, Atom Bomb, and Papa Shango. those are my top three of like being able to do my thing. And, you know, and they were chosen, you know, it was that real kind of comic book, kind of over the top, had some edge to them. And yeah, you know, with Pop, I still have one of Papa Shango's top hats. I have one of his skulls. I dressed up because I had so much Papa Shango actual gear. At one point, I was invited to a Halloween party, and I didn't have a costume because I waited to the last minute, and I dressed up as Papa Shango with his real stuff. Brilliant. So it was fun.
That's amazing. So you touched on a couple of other sort of key characters that you helped bring to life. Let's talk about Razor Ramon to begin with, because his original look, it was quite far from what he actually ended up with, wasn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good example of multiple designers working on the same costume. So the original, his debut, and I didn't even know this until recently, that he debuted with a different costume than mine, until fans started saying, hey, you know, he did appear with the long purple pants with the razor blades on them. And that was Jay's design with, and originally he had puffy sleeves with a, almost kind of looked like a swashbuckler in a way. And I had no idea, but I guess maybe it was a time sensitive kind of situation where they did the designs, they sent them off, and they had that done. But then there was a moment in the WWF's gym where I would go after work to Miss Rush Hour, get a workout in, and every once in a while the wrestlers would come in and they would get a workout also when they were in town for a show or whatever, or to meet with Vince. And while I was down there, Scott Hall walked in, and I guess somebody told him that I was the guy who designed his costume, because he came over to me and he said he was super appreciative. Thanked me. He's like, man, I love it, brother. He goes, I have to, you know, I do have a request though. And he goes, that request is, I've been working so hard on my legs. He goes, we gotta go with trunks instead of the long pants that, and I thought that he was referring to the long pants that I designed, which maybe he was, which was the black pants with the Razor logo on it that everybody knows, with the gold razor blades. And I could see in your background that that you have an example of it right there. And so that was an easy adjustment. We just took made the trunks out of took the legs off and put the razor blades on the knee pads. And, you know, it's the Razor Ramon that everybody knows. So, yeah. So I don't know what the details are of, you know, as far as I know, he only appeared like once, his debut with those purple pants, and then he went right to. So I think maybe the designs got sent off. There's a possibility the wrong design got sent off, and they produced it, and there wasn't enough time to get the costume design that he wanted done, or they did both of them, and they you know, he just chose to stick with my design. I'm not 100% positive about how it went, but I'm glad it went the way it did.
I was going to say that this is probably one of the more I mean, they're all recognizable, but in terms of his legacy, I suppose, that he left behind, you know, during his days in the ring, this has got to be one of the bigger ones that you can hang your hat on. That's
100% accurate. I mean, he was, I thought, a really excellent, he had such a good imposing kind of look to the character, and, you know, built like a freaking superhero. And, you know, he just really came across really well. But I think as far as it was a more traditional type look besides the vest. And I really, you know, I liked it because it was the first design that I ever did where I designed the logo and the costume. So I was really proud that it was the first logo I ever designed in my life, I think.
And that's the logo that he kept on all, no matter what color changes or design changes, he always had that.
Right.
That's going to be quite cool. You won't see a Razor Ramon match without it. So it's a good bit of publicity, really.
Yeah, exactly. So it was, and then when he got inducted into the Hall of Fame as Razor Ramon, not as Scott Hall, that was a super proud moment of like, oh man, one of the designs is now in the Hall of Fame. That's super cool.
You can't top that.
Yeah. Well, you can. I was going to say the only way to top it is if somehow I got inducted into the Hall of Fame.
You know what? I implore anyone out there who may be listening to this who's got any kind of influence in that department. I think your contribution to certainly my memories, my childhood, is phenomenal. And to know that I've only just recently found out who you are. Be able to link it back to you, you deserve your chance to basically stand up and say, yeah, I did that.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I really do. And actually, this is a subject that I usually talk about towards the end, but since we're talking about it, it's actually quite a personal situation where when I was working there with Jay, we were a team and hit it off. He was about 15 years older than me, but so young in spirit, and we worked so well together. He left the company and we stayed in touch, became lifelong friends. And in 2015, Jay was diagnosed with leukemia, and it was one of the we talked on the phone regularly. He was in New York still. I moved down to North Carolina, and one of the things that we joked about was he brought up one day of us getting into the Hall of Fame, of like being recognized, and we would laugh about it because it was a pipe dream. We had no idea at the time of the impact that we made and the kind of importance for that era. And we would laugh about it. And he was like, man, he goes, neither one of us are suit people, but he goes, man, can you imagine me and you going up there in our tuxes? And we would joke and laugh. And it turns out that he passed away in 2015. And it kind of like, was just one of those things that I always thought about. And then last year, when I started posting all this stuff, I just joined some Facebook groups and started sharing it just because, it was like, all right, you know what, let's get this stuff out there. And I can't believe the reception and the response that I got. And it's so humbling. I can't tell you how much I appreciate, and actually I'm a bit uncomfortable with the magnitude of the compliments and the outpour of support that I've been getting. It's so unbelievably rewarding, but it also sparked that memory of me and Jay talking about this, and I was like, my God, is this actually a possibility of us getting into the Hall of Fame? And the more and more I talk to people and share this, it seems like it's becoming more and more realistic. And I can't tell you that if I could possibly get Jay into the Hall of Fame and have him honored for him, his family, and his widow Gina, that would be a life goal that accomplished. That would be absolutely unbelievable. So
it's definitely something, anyone out there, including myself, can do anything to help support that. I think, let's get that happening.
Yeah, that would be, and then I heard about the which I had no idea, but I heard about the Warrior Award, and I've shared stories about the Ultimate Warrior. People have asked, hey, good experiences, bad experience at the WWE. And, one of the bad experiences was being backstage at Papa Shango's debut. I was working on his cape, and I mean, it was coming down to the wire. The cape wasn't finished. I was wiring rubber snakes onto it and spiders and all kinds of stuff and trying to get this thing ready. And the Ultimate Warrior came walking backstage, and instead of walking around me, he walked right through the cape, hooked the cape on his foot and kicked it across the room. Didn't even make eye contact with me, went into the bathroom, and, and I just stood there like, I was like, oh man, I was like, there's not a whole lot I can do, but I was like, wow, that really sucks.
Yeah.
And then I heard about the Warrior Award and his speech and his suggestion to award the people in the behind the scenes and create this award, which they did. And I have to say and put it out there that all is forgiven if that comes through, and and it would be so ironic and come full circle if that experience turned into one of the greatest experiences of working there.
It may just be karma in the best possible way. Maybe you came to appreciate the guys like yourself, the unsung heroes, really, later on in life. And could be your avenue in.
Yeah, and it's just a crazy thing to hear, when you say unsung heroes. It's like, I was 25, 26 years old, making a living doing this, and, super happy doing it, but thinking that it was going to be a stepping stone to get to Marvel Comics. And which it was. I mean, when I left the WWF, I went on to interview for DC Comics at a gallery show that my buddy introduced me to one of the editors, and I started working for DC Comics, and then rolled that into Marvel Comics, and started doing that. So it did work out that way. But the irony of the whole situation was that the impact that I made was with the WWF, in the big scheme of things. Yeah. So it's kind of crazy 30 years later learning that, my God, this is, I had absolutely no clue of how beloved that era was and the characters.
And I think from a personal point of view as well, so, your work starts off on the page, all of your ideas, your passion that ends up on the page. For us, our superheroes are brought to life because of because of your work. We see them in the ring and everything, but they wouldn't have been brought to life so much without the work that you did. So
yeah, it's interesting too. So you bring up another point about bringing it to life. And one of the things that was really interesting about doing drawings on paper and then seeing them come alive, literally, was that some of them translated very well and some of them did not translate very well. And I have not shared a few of my designs that I consider embarrassing moments of my career.
Okay.
And for
this
a
is
long
going to be a
time,
This is going to be a later question anyway. So yeah.
What's that?
This is going to be a later question anyway. So yeah, are there anything that you worked on that you kind of put under the carpet and sort of don't want to put your name to?
Okay, so I can speak. In the past, there was a few that I did not want to put my name to, and now that things have come full circle, I'm a bit more confident in what I've done in my career, and I don't have that insecurity. So I think one of the interesting things is to reveal your failures along with your accomplishments and your successes.
Absolutely.
So and I'm not sure if you're familiar, but every Friday on Reddit, on some of the Reddit groups and Facebook groups, I do what I call Costume Concept Friday, and I post a different wrestler with my concept designs on Friday. Usually Friday morning-ish, late morning, I'll post it up, and then and it's become a regular thing now. So I've posted most of the costumes that I'm proud of, and I'm going to start getting into, okay, here's embarrassing moments costume.
Right.
And it's kind of funny because some of the costumes that I thought that were a bit not as received as well as I would have liked, or failures, or I thought that there was a few costumes that were not successful, and when I posted them, I'm getting a response that people love them. So there's a few that I'm fully confident that they are failures, and they're like, whether it was the wrestler or my designs or whatever. But Max Moon was one of them. I thought Max Moon was too gimmicky, and I thought it was a little bit over the top. And it turns out that so many people are like, oh my God, 6-year-old me, 7-year-old me, that was like, he was a superhero, and this, yeah. So it's so funny, like with me not knowing the real inside of the fandom. I'm not exactly sure now how things were received. One of my Kane costumes, I designed Kane's costume. That was one of the later costumes. When I stopped working for them, there was a gap of period that I was just doing my Marvel thing, and they called me back, and I did Kane's costume in like 2000. Geez, it was like 2001, 2002, right around there. And I thought that was not well received, but I'm getting a lot of feedback saying that they loved the costume. It was one of their favorite Kane costumes, and I had little tidbits that there was a request from the art director to add Spawn, Todd McFarlane's Spawn character, to the mask. So if you look back at it, and I posted those on Facebook, the Facebook groups, fairly recently. You can see the Spawn influence without being over the top like a ripoff.
Cool, that's very cool. For a character who you wouldn't think would need any more kind of doing to him, really.
Right.
When it first came out, it keeps there's always room for tweaks and improvements, I suppose.
Yeah, and you know what? I guess someone like him, I mean, geez, how many looks did The Undertaker go through? So I think they just get bored sometimes, and they just want a different look. They were, I mean, when the guys get really, when they're in the top 10 and they become, or top 5, I think they like to change their look and keep things fresh, get the fans talking, that type of thing. Even if it's just changing the colors of their costumes, like Razor did. He went with the green, he went with the purple, he went with the black.
That was going to be another point I was going to bring up. Actually, I'm quite interested in is obviously when you've done the initial design, and a bit like Razor's a good example, and then you have these ones that are either a color change or they go through another change. So I believe you did the first costume for Sparky Plugg, Bob Holly.
Yep.
And I must admit, the first time I saw him, which I think was his first pay-per-view appearance, which was the Royal Rumble 94, I didn't know him at all. He just came racing into the ring, and it was his costume that caught my eye. And I was like, even by today's standards, that looks pretty out there.
Yeah.
He went through a little bit of a change as he sort of dropped the Sparky Plugg kind of character and went towards Bob Holly. Did you have anything to do with when the costumes then morphed and changed, or did somebody else literally just tweak your original design?
Okay, for that particular one, I had nothing. So it's funny that the Sparky Plugg costume design was the last design I ever did while working in-house. Okay. It was a time when the WWF was going through all those scandals, and there was some terrible stuff going on. Lots of let's say the media was all over the WWF with many different issues, and they were financially they were struggling. I watched when we designed a costume, we would go out on the road, and at the TV tapings for the debuts, we were responsible to make sure the costumes went smoothly and things like that. And at these TV tapings, they had these unbelievable like monster buffets of food, and they hotel rooms and rent-a-cars and like everything. And then we watched the buffets disappear. Then we would have to share rent-a-cars. We'd have to share hotel rooms. Then we would have to drive our own cars. The cafeteria at the office at the Titan Towers closed down. They started renting out the second floor of the building to a travel agency, and it was scary. It was like, wow. And then they started laying off all the freelance artists and designers. And I watched my friends just disappearing, and people were being laid off. And I worked so well with my boss, and she fought for me and kept me on. She told me that I was the last freelancer in the company, and she was keeping me there as long as she could. And then she came to me one day with some tears in her eyes, and she was like, "This is it." She's like, I have to let you go. I'm going to keep you on working from home for a while, as long as I can. And she gave me the Sparky Plugg assignment to design possibly one last costume.
Okay.
I had absolutely no creative license for that costume whatsoever. It was, here's this guy, you create a NASCAR looking costume for him with all the patches and advertisements and all that kind of stuff. Make it look a little bit WWF, WWE, make it look kind of like that. But I think it was Vince's kind of way of trying to get the NASCAR fans connected, intermingling with the wrestling fans.
Oh, yeah.
And so that. I designed the jacket and the singlet and the whole thing, but that was not my concept.
No, okay.
And then, to answer your question, no, I had nothing to do. What happens is once they have their debut and they start wrestling, I think a lot of the times they verbally tell the seamstresses what they want. And I'm not aware if somebody else was doing costume designs after that. Maybe my boss Adriana was the only one, but no. Typically, I had nothing. Once that initial design came out, I had nothing to do with the second and third generations of those costumes. Yeah.
Just one that's sprung to mind, actually, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that you had something to do with, was the original 1, 2, 3 Kid.
Yeah.
The blue one with that's again that kind of time that, I mean, the way that he made his name. He obviously had an upset victory over Razor, obviously, so you got your work going in tandem there. But he was completely different, build wise, superstar wise. He was really appealing, at a young age. It's a guy we could follow. And again, it's so in your face. The look of him was so bright, so vibrant. He really stood out.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he stood out to us as the designers and stuff because he was one of them that we didn't know what he looked like, because he was the Lightning Kid, I think. Before that, and so they showed us pictures of the Lightning Kid, and they said, we really want to keep that kind of feel, but he's going to be the 1, 2, 3 Kid, and we want this real fun, childlike feel to carry over into the WWF. And I remember meeting him for the first time and being like, holy crap. I was like, it's one guy that's not towering over me, and making me feel like a little kid. I was like, all right, like I don't feel like like a little kid around him. But yeah, I did a couple of different designs for him, and they liked that. Vince was really approved 2 of them at the same time. One of them with the 1, 2, 3s all over the costume, and the other one with the actual the fingers counting on his leg. And I never even realized it, but I'd gotten questions on social media, and they're like, "Why'd you do the 3, 2, 1 from the top to bottom?" And I always thought he was the 3, 2, 1 Kid, and I have no idea. I didn't even know I did that. I think. To be honest, I've never admitted this, but when I did that costume, I don't really think that I was expecting it to get approved and become an actual costume.
Okay.
It was the other costumes that I did that I thought would be approved. And that was like, sometimes if my boss said, we need you to come up with 4 ideas, I would do 2 of them that were like, boom, you know, an image, a vision would come in my head. I would put that on paper. And then when I kind of like started like running out of ideas or something, sometimes I'd do like 1 or 2 quick ones just to do my job.
Yeah.
And sometimes those were chosen, and it was, you know, it was interesting. So, and I think that's what the case was with that one.
That's cool. That's cool. Again, such a memorable character. So moving on, we'll circle back to one guy in particular after this next bit because he ties in with where you're currently at. But one of the most memorable things that I remember that you did were the Survivor Series 93 artwork.
Yeah.
Now, I remember this is how my memory works. I remember my 10th birthday, mainly because I got a Mountie Hasbro action figure, but also because I got the Survivor Series 93 VHS. And it was that cover that really stuck with me. That was my favorite VHS cover ever.
Neat.
And I remember seeing in the WWF magazine when they, months before, when they were building for the event, they had both sides. I think side by side or over the page or something. They had both the Foreign Fanatics and the All Americans one. And I was just like, it was so different again at the time. The only time I've seen that is with the Royal Rumble 91-92.
Yep.
With the artwork that was done there. Obviously, you weren't involved in that. I guess was it someone else that did those ones?
That was a friend of mine, and at the time was, you know, I didn't know he was actually kind of a childhood hero of mine, Joe Jusko. Okay. And I recognized his work because I knew him from Marvel Comics. And growing up in middle school and high school, he was one of the youngest painters to ever start working for Marvel. And, you know, he started painting at like 17 years old. And so he's not even that much older than me, but I've been, you know, I was influenced and was a fan of his, and then came to the WWF and saw his work, you know, for the Rumble 91-92. So yeah, no, that was not me. I took over in 93 because honestly, I worked cheaper at the time.
But it's a very similar kind of style and everything. It was nice to see that they had gone that route to make, you know, that event seem all that more special, really. Just sort of tell us how that came about for you, sort of, you know, what the pitch was and sort of the actual production of it.
Yeah, so that was one of those. So while I was working there, I'm doing, you know, pen and ink work. I'm doing the costume designs. I'm doing some logos here and there. Lots of pencil work, lots of preliminary drawings, all that kind of stuff. But to be honest, my love in art is painting. I love to paint, and that's what I wanted to do. And I was watching, being the house illustrator, watching them still hire out the big jobs to other illustrators, like the Rumble stuff. And I have to admit, it hurt a little bit because I understood that I was young, and it was a big risk to ask me to do, you know, one of the advertisements for the big events. And if it didn't go well, time was always of essence. And, you know, there's a risk factor where it's like, oh, geez, now we have less time. We have to hire somebody else because this kid, you know, couldn't pull it off. Well, there got to a point where I guess they just got the confidence in me because I had such a high percentage of success with the jobs that they were giving me that they came to me and described the Survivor Series. And I had no idea that it was a big deal, that the paper, you know, I knew it was a big event and stuff, but I had no idea that, you know, pay-per-view was the pinnacle of, you know, of viewership, you know, the viewership, it was going to go, you know, be everywhere. So really, they described to me the 4 wrestlers that they wanted in the painting, and, you know, it was Tatanka, Lex, and the Steiners. They said they wanted him around a Thanksgiving turkey, dressed like Yokozuna, and make it very American. They gave me some fairly specific things. I believe that it was my art director's idea to have Lex holding the fork and knife over his head, staring at the turkey about to cut it. But what I would have to do is I would have to go, and like I said before, I work with photo reference, and I like to make things look as kind of real, not cartoony as I possibly can. So I would go up to the reference room, which was upstairs, and I would go through all the files, Lex Luger files, and look through photos and try to get a perfect face, try to find one that, where his arms and this and that, and match them up. And what I call it Frankensteining is putting their pieces together. And then I would do the same thing with Tatanka, and I would do the same thing with the Steiners. Sometimes, those are my hands holding the knife, and I would take photos, and then work that into the illustration. And it was just one of those things where it just really came together. The painting came out exactly what they were hoping for. I tell this story. It's actually one of the most stressful moments of my life, but I brought the painting in, and they absolutely loved it. And no good deed goes unpunished. They loved it so much that's when they came up with the idea to do the second page of the Foreign Fanatics. Problem was, I was leaving on a vacation to Europe the following day. The next day, I had literally 24 hours before I was going to get on a plane and leave. And they already got it approved by Vince. And that was the thing. You don't let Vince down. So I had to make a decision. And, they paid me well. And I was like, wow, I got to pull this off. And I went home, and I literally painted for 24 hours straight. I put on a pot of coffee, and I stayed caffeinated, stayed up all night, 24 hours, finished that Foreign Fanatics painting in one day, and drove it into Stamford, Connecticut from Long Island, New York, and delivered it. They loved it. Went out to LaGuardia, got on a plane, and pretty much passed out till the plane landed in Holland. Okay. So yeah, it was.
You earned that break, basically.
Yeah, big time. After that, I tell you, that was one of the most. There is an unbelievable feeling as an illustrator, as an artist, when you finish a project and you present it to your client, and there's an overwhelming positive response. There is a crash that happens, and on a normal, in normal circumstances. Yeah. In this circumstance, there was like no sleep and the crash, and I was like, that was one of the most relaxing flights I've ever taken. So yeah, it was that. That's the whole that whole Survivor Series is very memorable to me. Yeah. And then I found out that it's such an iconic event, and people remember that. And then when I got back to make things to add on to the story, when I got back from Europe, they told me that Tatanka got hurt, and I had to paint the Undertaker in the exact pose. So the saga continued.
Well
it
done,
just kept going, and so I did that, and that's the Undertaker appears on the VHS covers, and I'm not sure where else, but a lot of people ask, why is the Undertaker in that? And then they didn't publish that in the magazine ad. There just wasn't time to do it.
I saw you. Somebody asked you in another group today about why wasn't Crush on the other one, because they did another switcheroo with the Foreign Fanatics team as well. I guess that was a time thing. It was just too late to make any adjustments, or did they dare not ask?
It's. I'll be honest. Until fairly recently, I didn't even know that Crush was the one who came in for Ludwig Borga. and to be, which is awesome because Crush was another one of my guys, one of my designs. It had to be. I don't have the exact answer, but I have to say it had to be a time factor. They just didn't have time to repaint, or they already sent out everything that they were sending out for promotion, and it was just in that gap of time where it's like the promotion's done.
Yeah.
So there, it makes sense to put Crush in the replace him in the painting. Yeah.
So let's circle back to one guy we've not talked about. It's another of your characters that you have connected with again recently, which is Adam Bomb.
Yep.
Again, visually, one of the most iconic, memorable looks I think they had back then, even today. So just talk a little bit firstly about how obviously you were involved with the WWF and doing this at the time, but can you remember your initial thoughts when they came to you with this character?
They didn't come to me with the character. That's one of the proudest moments. As far as costume design goes, they came to me with Brian's photo of him as, what was he, Wrath in the WCW before Adam Bomb?
Night Stalker, I think he was.
Night Stalker, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, Night Stalker. He was Night Stalker, and they gave me a snapshot of his head, so I knew what he looked like, and that's why in the costume designs it actually has his his likeness in it.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we don't know what we want him to be. So that was the first time I believe that they just said, no theme, you come up with the theme, and let's see what you do. And I remember I did a mercenary type theme. I did a medieval knight with chainmail. I did there was like a commando with camouflage, and he was like the master of weapons kind of thing. And I came up with those three, but Adam Bomb, the nuclear idea, was really influenced by my comic book background, and that is what I wanted to do. So that was the one time where I could be like, wow, I can really have fun and do this kind of like real graphic comic book type symbol on the chest. There's Batman, there's Superman, there's Green Lantern. They have that symbol on their chest, and kind of do that comic book superhero look. And I came up with the idea to do the goggles, and I did the goggles and the the whole thing with the gloves. And when they chose that was a super proud moment where I was like, wow, this is 100%. I can claim that there was nobody else involved with this costume except me, and I was really proud of that. Then when they actually had the costume approved by Vince and sent off to the seamstresses, they came back to me and they said, okay, the seamstresses they're working on his singlet. You're responsible to make his goggles and gloves. And I was like, I've never done any kind of costume, creation before. And went out, went to electrician shops and found goggles, and I spray painted a bunch of different ones and tried different things, hand painted them the yellow with the red. And then I came up with the idea that the all electricians goggles obviously have clear glass so they can see while they're working. That doesn't work with a wrestling costume or a comic book type character. I came up with the idea of using the reflective mylar inside the lenses so that it would create this kind of weird glow and mystique. And I went up to the WWF's merchandise department and got one of Bret Hart's novelty glasses that just, was just that flimsy mylar stuff. And I took the glass lens and I sliced out the circles and I inserted Bret Hart's mylar into his goggles, and that became the Adam Bomb, the Adam Bomb goggles look. And then the gloves, I bought yellow gloves, I bought black gloves. I cut them up into the that triangular shape, and then I got grommets, and I grommeted the gloves together so that they were super strong. So that when I didn't know whether he was going to wrestle with them or whether he was going to take them off or what. But yeah, that was the first time that they were like, you have to create these elements from scratch. So yeah, that was fun.
I understand part of your role probably, I don't know if it was every time, but you had to be there for their debut when the wrestlers were making their debut with your costumes or whatever. Can you remember much about when Adam Bomb first went out there and how you felt, knowing that this costume was like your baby almost?
Well, yeah. Okay, whenever a costume debuted, it was super exciting, but a little bit nerve-wracking also, because there was always the possibility that before Janet Jackson's whatever they called
malfunction,
the equipment costume malfunction, wardrobe malfunction, right?
Yeah.
There was always the possibility of wardrobe malfunction with your design, and we were responsible. Like, our asses were kind of on the line with the functionality of the costumes. So with Adam Bomb, now I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story, and I've told it in other places, but Adam Bomb's debut was a very unique experience.
Okay.
I went backstage, made sure the goggles and the gloves, everything was together. He had his singlet. When he came out, I mean, it was like, it was without a doubt, hands down, the closest I've ever come to when the drawing was translated to life. It was unbelievable how much he looked like the drawing. And so that was 100%. That was a victory right there. And that had nothing to do with me. It had to do with the fact that Brian, looked like a superhero. Yeah. So sometimes they don't quite look like that, and the costume, doesn't have the effect that you want it to. This one was 100%. But because of that fact that he looked so imposing and so dynamic and so good, that there was another wrestler by the name of Mr. Perfect that was kind of heading towards the end of his career, and I guess a little bit insecure, and out of the blue came storming over to me and got in my face, and he just started screaming from right here in my face, are you the guy that designed Bomb's costume? And he was like, who do you think you are, designing his costume with the same singlet cut? And it was so ludicrous and absurd that this guy was so sensitive about a singlet cut that I actually nervously started laughing, and he thought I was laughing at him, and it was this super uncomfortable thing. And I got to the point where he was so angry, I thought that he was going to hit me. I thought he was going to actually hit me. And at the time, I was I was out working out pretty hard. I was a pretty big guy. I looked at him and I was like, man, he ain't Scott Steiner. And I was like, man, if he hits me, I think I'm going to throw down with him. And that thought went through my head. And it was one of those surreal moments where I'm like, I can't believe I'm contemplating fighting Mr. Perfect backstage at Adam Bomb's. It was like one of those weird dreams. And, I was like, I would have probably got, my ass handed to me, but how funny of a story would it be? And it was one of those things. And I caught my composure and I just said, hey, listen, Kurt, I was like, Vince approves everything. I was like, if you got a problem, man, you got to go to him and, talk to him about it. And I guess in his rage, that made sense. And he just turned around, went to Vince, started yelling at Vince, and Vince started laughing, and he like punched a locker or did something and stormed off. And I was just standing there with my heart pounding, and I was like, man, I have a job to do. And I was like, this, it was hard to get back on track, but everything went super well. And I have a super funny story and experience for Brian's debut.
Brilliant.
So,
yeah. And was it a coincidence then, just thinking off the top of my head? So Survivor Series 93, Adam Bomb and Mr. Perfect were meant to be in the same match on opposite sides, and Mr. Perfect ended up not performing. So,
oh, no way.
Yeah, so I think he must have gone out injured. Maybe there's another reason. Maybe he just didn't want to be.
Man,
there you go.
I did not know that, and I mean, it was actually, from what I remember, it was he was very upset.
Right.
And he's not the only one that was very temperamental about their costumes, their colors, the designs, because they have a look, and the thing is, I'm not judging Kurt by that. It was one of those experiences where I can laugh about it now, and it was a little bit, it was quite uncomfortable. But hey, maybe the guy was having a bad day. Maybe who knows what was going on in his life with his contract, with whatever it is. When you get older and a little bit wiser, you realize that there's always reasons why people act out.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe he didn't. Maybe he did. It got to the point where he was that uncomfortable or sensitive towards the thing. I don't know. But
let's start a new rumor, shall we?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
But so bringing more up to date. So, like I say, you connected with Adam Bomb, Brian Clark again. So tell us a bit about sort of how you've been working together again at the moment.
Okay, so this is, and this is part of this time in my career where things have come full circle, like I said before. So I start posting and sharing my stuff on Facebook and Reddit and these and Instagram and social media. People start becoming aware of what I've done, and evidently a fan in one of the Facebook groups is like the biggest Adam Bomb fan alive. And I was chatting with him, direct messaging with him a little bit, and he was asking me questions, and I was trying to, give him as much, Adam Bomb information as I could. And evidently he went back to Brian and told Brian that I was in this group. And out of the blue, I get this message from Brian, and he didn't identify him. He just said, hey, man, wanted to see if you had any paintings of me. And I just was like, not sure. I recognized the name immediately. I was like, oh, shit, it's Brian Clark. And I wasn't sure if he was aware that I was just an artist and doing paintings of wrestlers, or if he actually knew that I was the designer and creator of his costume. So I just responded something like, well, I was like, I don't really have any paintings of you, but I created you, like kind of like, this is, and he was aware, or, and it was one of those serendipitous things where one of my favorite costumes that I created came back, and he said, listen, I have the copyrights to all my characters, and I'm actually looking for an artist to work with on creating merchandise for my line. Do you have any interest? Are you still even working as an artist? And I was like, oh man, are you kidding? I was like, I've been doing stuff for Marvel, DC, Iron Maiden, Heavy Metal Magazine, World of Warcraft, Magic the Gathering. I said, that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years, completely out of the wrestling scene. But man, it's coming full circle. And if we can kind of work out a situation that works for both of us, I would love to, do something together. And it took a little, we worked it out, and he threw an idea out at me of him with the painting that you have in the background there of him holding the nuclear warning kind of thing with a green, that's kind of acid green glowing mushroom cloud in the background and stuff. And he had the idea of him with like kind of the flag and standing like kind of full body on like almost like a Captain America kind of thing. And I said, man, I was like, I like the idea, but I think it could be even more dramatic. And let's go comic book on it with a real comic book pose of like, and I created the thing where it almost has the visual of his body becomes the stem of the mushroom cloud, and works in. So you can see the cloud behind him, and then his V shape comes in, and then there's the explosion underneath. And we did that, and they just released it as a T-shirt and posters and things like that. So we'll see if there's more to come working together.
And there you go. On that subject, anyone who is interested in tracking down any of the merchandise with this image on it, prowrestlingtees.com if you're in the States. If you're in the UK or in Europe, wrestlemerchcentral.com. You'll be able to find it there. Or his new merch line is looking amazing. I connected with him myself a little while back when I sort of found he was in these groups as well. He was like, go right back to this point, been like with you today, go right back to this era that I absolutely love. I still live there, really.
Yeah, I tell you, that's one of the things that also makes me real happy is that back in the day, I didn't have a whole lot of interaction with Brian, but the interaction that we did have was very positive. He was a very cool guy, and I'll be honest, I'm loyal to the bone. When somebody's good to me, I do my best to reciprocate. And even though it wasn't like a big deal, there was a few guys that were super appreciative, really cool. And Scott Hall was one of them. Brian was one of them. Charles Wright absolutely was one of them. And I'm like, man, really, I was like happy that it came full circle and I could kind of come back and help him out. He's, the fact that I designed a costume that worked so well with merchandise, with the, the theme and the logo. And I love that he's doing all this stuff and able to utilize, that imagery all these years later. I just wish the best for him.
Yeah. And you've given us a hell of a lot of memories. And it's great to see you still out there, creating stuff like this. For countless like me are still going to enjoy it. So just sidestepping just quickly, one thing that you said there about the Iron Maiden. Is it the Iron Maiden comic and that you worked on? Was it? Or
yes, correct. So
that's very cool.
Let's see. Before the pandemic, it was either 2018, 2019. Heavy Metal Comics did an Iron Maiden comic book that coincided with their tour, the Legacy of the Beast tour. And I've been working with an individual. His name is Lexi Leon, and he has been so good to me. And we've been working together for so many years. And I did work for his personal properties. And he told me years ago that he was working on a deal with Iron Maiden. And he asked me, would you be interested in working on some Iron Maiden stuff if that comes through? And I've been working in this business, the comic book business, long enough where I have to say 95% of our promises are broken. Most people mean well, but they move on and do something and they meet someone else and the deal never comes through. 5 years later or so, he gets back to me and he's one of the only guys in the industry that actually kept his word with that long of a period of time in between.
Okay.
And he came back to me and he said, man, the Iron Maiden deal came through, and he's like, you want to work on a couple of covers? And I was just like, and this was my fanboy moment, because I grew up in the 80s metal scene with my friends in metal bands and going to see them at L'Amour's in New York, and going to the heavy metal clubs and the whole thing. And I'm like, to paint Eddie the Head was one of those moments where I'm like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And he gave me those 2 covers. And to even further the experience, after I did the covers, he hooked me up with VIP tickets to the Iron Maiden show in Charlotte, North Carolina here. And I have pictures with Steve Harris, and went behind the scenes and drank Trooper beer before the show. It was absolutely awesome. I can't thank Lexi enough. And now he has another project for me that I can't announce yet because it's not a done deal, but it's another super fun one. And in the future I'll be able to announce that.
So I suggest to everyone then, I know I'm already there, but follow Tom on social media. I can't recommend your page enough, The Art of Tom Fleming. I hope I got that right.
Yep.
It's fantastic. If you want to go out there and see, you may be familiar with the WWF side of Tom's work, but going on there and see everything else is phenomenal. The stuff that you've done. So it's a great place to go and be amazed.
Well, thanks. I have to send an apology out to all the folks on Facebook, because I've been getting a crazy amount of friend requests. And Facebook on personal pages only allows 5,000 friends, and I have about 4,990, and I leave 10 spaces for professional reasons, like if an art director or somebody big in the industry wants to hook up, I have to leave those spaces open. So I leave 10 spaces. So I can't confirm friend requests on Facebook, but I have The Art of Tom Fleming on Facebook, and please go and like that page and follow me on that page. And everything I put on my personal page, I also put on The Art of Tom Fleming page. So and same with Instagram. Instagram is Tom Fleming Artwork, at Tom Fleming Artwork, and that's my website also, tomflemingartwork.com.
There you go. So, just to close it up, I'm not going to be too proud to say this is a bit of a dream come true, because, but around the time that I discovered again who you were, what you did, you've been on my bucket list for this podcast. You were a guest, in my top 5 that I had to have on there. So thank you so much for helping me tick that off. This has been amazing.
It's my pleasure, Chris. Whenever anybody tells me that they that I'm on a bucket list, and they like most people, all my close friends and family tell me to shut up. they don't need to hear all my crap, No. So it's super nice, and man, it feels really good to hear that kind of stuff. It's a little surreal, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It never, no matter how many times I hear it, it never gets old. I appreciate it, the same amount every time. The fact that I can do artwork, and I've done artwork that people appreciate that much, is, I'd be nothing without people, viewing my artwork, and I wouldn't be able to make a living doing it. So, really the thanks goes to you and your following and everybody that's appreciates it.
No worries. I'm not going to let you go without one final question.
Absolutely.
So I had a few sort of quick fire questions, but you've kind of covered a few of them. So what your favorite project was, what your least favorite, most embarrassing was. We touched on those. Now, is there a could be WWF, WCW? Is there a wrestling superstar whose costume you either would have wanted to work on that didn't, or one that you've seen since that you look at and think, I could have done a better job on that?
It's a good question. I to be honest, I don't follow wrestling currently that much. Although I do have a 9-year-old nephew and my brother-in-law who's a bit younger than me. He followed wrestling when he was younger, and now he's introducing wrestling to my nephew. And now my nephew's starting to ask me questions about, do you know who so and so is and stuff.
Right.
And he brought the Fiend to my attention.
Okay, yeah.
Fairly recently. Yeah. So I looked at the Fiend and I was like, oh man, I was like, that is a pretty cool concept. I immediately, as soon as I saw the Fiend, I was like, oh my god, that's the Violator from Todd McFarlane's Spawn character.
Okay.
It was, to me, it had like a super resemblance. But that's the kind of fun kind of themes that I like. The thing is, now they don't, as far as I know, they don't do the kind of real dynamic, over the top, even cheesy, gimmicks.
No, that's one reason I'm very much still a sort of a 80s, 90s. I think there's so much about that era that you don't get close to sort of these days. But I mean, even back when you were involved in it, was there anyone you saw, any concept in that came out that you were like, I would have loved to have worked on that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because I'm sure there was some costumes that I didn't work on the design, but then I saw the design, I was like, oh man, there was some pretty out there concepts at a time, but offhand, I gotta say, there's nothing that jumps out that I was like, man, I wish I could have got my hands on that. I kind of just worked whatever the job was at hand is what I worked on, and just kind of like took that path. I can't really answer that. I can't really answer that question definitively, like for sure. I can say this. One guy that was done with his time at the WWF when I started working there, that was on my radar, that would have been really cool to work with, was Jimmy Fly Snuka, Superfly Snuka. Yeah, Superfly Snuka. He was the first guy when I was a kid that I was a gymnast when I was younger. And he was the first guy the first guy I was aware of that was built like a superhero, that did the acrobats. And I was like, that was fun to me. I never got into the soap opera kind of behind the scenes ropes, all that kind of stuff. But Superfly was like, he was cool, and that might have been a cool guy to work with.
That's a great answer. Anyway, thank you once again, Tom. Thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for the memories, and thank you for sparing your time. This has been amazing having you on, mate.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. And if you remember questions that you'd like to follow up on, you want to do a part 2, man, it's like we'd work this out. I'll find a little spot in my schedule that works for both of us, and we can go from there. So yeah, man, it's my pleasure. We'll be in touch.
Cool. Thank you very much. Cheers, mate.
All right. Take care, Chris.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Once Upon a Turnbuckle to keep updated about all future shows.